This is a preview of the latest episode of Gators Breakdown. Link to the full episode is in the description. Comparing Billy Napier and Dan Mullen in the recruiting. Hey, look, numbers say it's not that different. And I hear you. Will hears you as well. Look, we know there's reasons why. We know there's different reasons. We know this is a whole different world of college football recruiting. Hey, Billy Napier just spoke on it today as well. We know all that, but just looking at the numbers, that's all we can go by right now, and that's what we will go by. Just with the declaration, at least from my side, yes, I know there's some reasons out there, and it is different with NIL and the transfer portal and all that stuff, but on Saturdays, that's not really going to matter all that much. So we have to look at, what the talent is coming into the University of Florida. The comparisons of one Billy Napier's recruiting so far to the guy he replaces, Dan Mullen.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had said something just sort of depressed after after Rashada left that this was a Dan Mullen class, and a bunch of people took me to task for it. And I was like, well, it's not quite a Dan Mullen class, but what about the first 2 years? If you start looking at those first 2 years, is it a Dan Mullen class? Turns out Dan Mullen actually did a better job of recruiting his first 2 years than Bill Napier has. Actually, the Napier ranking should be up to 90.46 now because they did readjust some of the commits. But anyway, I mean, look, Napier wins in 24/7 rank. He wins in national rank. He wins in conference rank. He wins in top 100 players 8-4. He wins in players ranked between 100 to 300. 5 stars, they had the same. Mullen had more commits. And so then obviously the natural criticism is, well, there were a bunch of guys who didn't qualify and a bunch of guys who left early and all that sort of stuff. So then I took out DeJuan Black, Davey Hammond, Wardrick Wilson, Jalen Jones, and Chris Steele from that 2019 class. And Mullen still wins on average player rating, national rank, conference rank, top 100s. They actually tie for players 101 to 300, and then Mullen just had one less commit. So what this really says is that Billy Napier can't have any attrition, because if he does, numbers are going to get really, really tight. It says that, look, Dan Mullen used the transfer portal too. I mean, you think about Van Jefferson, you think about Trevon Grimes, you think about Jonathan Bernard, you think about Adam Schuler, and even the last year he was there, the defensive tackles that they brought in. So, look, I mean, Mullen actually hit on the transfer portal when you think about it. I mean, Trevon Grimes was productive
early on,
even though he was a undrafted free agent. Van Jefferson was a second-round draft pick. Adam Schuler was very productive. John Grenard was a third-round draft pick. Brenton Cox probably going to be a fifth-round draft pick. So was a contributor for Florida, not a star, but a contributor. So Mullen had quite a bit of success in the transfer portal as well. So that's really what we got to be thinking about, right? I mean, obviously Osiris Torrance is going to be a first-round selection. We'll see what happens with Montrell Johnson. Obviously the guys we've all talked about, Mazuka and Banks and Goodwin and those sorts of guys. We'll see what comes out of those guys they bring in the transfer portal. But on a numbers basis, the criticism of Mullen was, he boosted up all of his conference rankings and his player rankings and things like that by having guys who didn't qualify. Well, one, it doesn't really change his 24/7 rank all that much. And even if you subtract the 5 guys from that class who didn't make it, from that 2019 class, who never made it to fall practice, you're still looking at something where Mullen has more total talent in the door than Billy Napier did. It is what it is, man. Like, we can talk about evaluations, and I hope that Billy Napier is a better talent evaluator than Dan Mullen.
While you're on that, go ahead, Will. But if you're going to go a lot further, go ahead. Stop there, though, because I do want to. That's the next point I was going to make. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say you can make that point, but on a raw numbers basis, the talent level after the first 2 years, like, Napier's are distributed differently. He had a worse transition class and a better bump class. Mullen had basically the same ratings 2 years in a row, but you're in the same place regardless.
So let's go through the 18 and 19 classes, Will. That's we did that on Gators Breakdown Plus not long ago, and it was I had a lot of fun with it. 19, not great at all when you throw in the attrition and who's contributed there for those classes. I'm trying to get this graphic down. I forgot where I was at for a second. There we go. So going to the 18 class, it was led by one Jacob Copeland. Okay, didn't finish his career at Florida, serviceable player at the University of Florida. Richard Garage, really good offensive lineman there for the Gators. So that was the second-ranked player in 18. And Dan Mullen's transition class, his first class, The third-ranked player in that class, one Emory Jones, did not live up to the recruiting profile for him, ends up transferring to Arizona State. And then the fourth-ranked player in that class never played it down for Florida. One wide receiver, Justin Watkins, late grab there by Dan Mullen to put in that 18 class, never played a down for Florida. Let you know just how wrong they can be sometimes. The fifth-ranked player in that class, one Kyle Pitts. So big get, of course, and a lot of the groundwork. This is one of those ones that the transition class. The big difference here is Dan Mullen didn't go all nuke on the class like Billy Napier did when he come in and basically nuked Dan Mullen's work and then built a lot of the class from the ground up. And then Dan Mullen comes in. A lot of the work done by one Jim McElwain for a lot of these players. After Kyle Pitts, Amari Burney played every year in his Gator career, had a really good senior year to go out the right way. Trey Dean was in that class as well. Contributor for all those years as well, but didn't really live up to the potential. Damian Pierce, big time, should have been involved more. No fault of his. There, Dan Mullen just not using him enough. Lucas Kroll was the next guy in line. Some big plays for the Gators in 2018. Then Andrew Chatfield never did much for Florida. Linebacker David Reese transferred out this past year for the Gators, didn't do much. Malik Langham didn't do much for the Gators there. Iverson Clement didn't do much. Noah Banks, nope. John Huggins, nope. Chris Black, nope. Unfortunately, Randy Russell, not a contributor either from the 2018 class. Dante Zanders moved around a whole bit. He was in that 2018 class as well, playing tight end this past year for the Gators. Griffin McDowell, not much. Then the last player, but only because he was a kicker, cannot test the value here of one kicker, Evan McPherson, there for the Gators. Hey, he's a better pro than he was a Gator, though. So
Nah, he was a good player for Florida. At least he won't get in trouble for celebrating during the halftime show this year during the Super Bowl. So.
But there's the 2018 class. The top of it, Copeland Garage. You had Emory Jones, Justin Watkins, Kyle Pitts, Amari Burney, Trey Dean, Damian Pierce. That's the top of the class. And then after that, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The top 8, besides Justin Watkins, had some big roles at Florida. So 8 guys in that 2018 class, 9 if you count McPherson. That you'd say good players or major contributors for the Gators.
Yeah, I mean, the 18 class actually for Dan Mullen isn't the reason he got fired.
Correct.
The 19 class is the reason he got fired.
Yep.
And honestly, you only need to look at the blue chips to understand why that is. So, like you mentioned, out of the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys in that 2018 class, 7 of them wound up starting significant games.
Yeah.
One of them turned into a star. I would almost call Garage a star because he started almost 30 games at left tackle.
I will completely agree with you.
And then Watkins washes out, right? So if we look at the 2022 blue chips in the transition class for Napier, now you've got Kamari Wilson, Shamar James, who started significant already. I think you can highlight him. Yep. McClellan, who was a backup. ETN, who was a backup, kind of in the same mold as Pierce, so we'll see where that goes. Then you got Devin Moore, who got injured but was playing relatively early. Tony Livingston and Jamari Lyons, who didn't really play at all. So
and Livingston now counts in this class, by the way, the 23 class. However, that works. So
yeah. So the point is that you look at that, and there were only 7 or 8 blue chips. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blue chips in that 2022 class. So in order to replicate what Mullen got out of that 2018 class, he's not going to be able to miss on any of those guys. Right. Or somebody down below that is going to have to step into a role that you may not have expected and that we haven't seen based on the freshman year at this point. Doesn't mean it can't happen, just means that hasn't happened yet. I think it's the same thing. You look at that 2019 class. Obviously, Chris Steele is the one that you go, oh, what a mess. Kind of reminds you of the Jaden Rashada saga. Then you got Kyrie Elam, who turned into a star, right? And here's where it starts to get bad for Mullen. Chris Bogle, Not a whole lot, right? Backup at best. Tyron Hopper played starter minutes, but transferred out before he really made a difference. Keon Zipper has sort of been a career backup. Diabate played starters minutes, but transfers out and seemed out of place. Lloyd Summerall, still on the roster, hasn't really played all that much. Naquan Wright.
He transferred out.
Oh, he transferred out. So
Yeah.
Naquan Wright, still, obviously he's transferred as well, but he was a starter at some point. Jalen Humphreys didn't really contribute that much. Michael Tarquin, contributed some at tackle, but was never like a stalwart. Then you got Jalen Jones, who never made it to fall practice. You got Jadon Hill, who obviously the injury has set him back a little bit, but played starters. And then William Harrod, who again back up on the offensive line. So I've got 1 star and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 starters out of that 2019 class. So Mullen got more stars and more starters out of his 18 class than he did his 19 class, that bump class. That's why things fell apart last year. And that and the quarterback play, obviously, because he couldn't get what he needed out of Richardson and out of Emory Jones in 2021. So look,
and
there are a ton.
Yeah, and mostly didn't hit on the 3 stars either. I mean, Chester Kimbrough, not a contributor. Deontay Mark's not a contributor. Riley Simon's not a contributor. Jamarcus Weston hasn't done much. Kingsley Iguakin, one of the best ones so far. Josiah Pierre, no non-contributor. Trent Whittemore, and somewhat contributor, but now he ends up transferring out of the program. Ethan White, a lot of starts the last few years there at offensive line. So, only a couple 3 stars that played above their level, I'd say in Ethan White and Kingsley, of course, they're starting along the offensive line. And then, as we said, the attrition of DeJuan Black ends up at Gator, but not in the 2019 class. DeAvi Hammond, nope. Wardrop Wilson, nope. Didn't even come out. Didn't even show up for a play for Florida. So yeah, it's the 2019 class that really did him in.
Well, so here's if you want to know whether Napier's a better evaluator and whether his methods work better, this is the exercise, right? 2 years from now, so Mullen had 13 starters out of his 26 blue chips. 3 of those guys were stars. You aren't getting anywhere in the SEC with 3 stars. Like 3 guys who turn into elite players in 2 recruiting classes just isn't going to be good enough. 3 all SEC players is going to get you middle of the pack performance, and that's what it's going to get you. You need Bill Sykes wrote a really nice article for Read and Reaction about a year ago talking about needing about 8 all SEC players on your roster in order to compete for the SEC championship. So that's what needs to happen, right? Now, Napier has 24 total blue chips in his first two classes, but only 7 in that first class. So he's got 17 here in the second class. He's going to need a hit rate of more than 13 really to say he's a better evaluator than Napier to be starters a couple of years from now. And he needs more than 3 stars. And that's going to be the question, right? Does Kelby Collins turn into a star? Does Aiden Mizell turn into a star? Does Jakeem Jackson turn into a star? Does Will Norman turn into a star? And if he just has a bunch of good starters, Florida will win a bunch of games, but they're not going to win the SEC. And that's the story of this recruiting class. It's my evaluation of this recruiting class. It's why it bothers me that it's sitting at the 13th and 14th spot, is I think there's going to be a lot of good starters who come out of this class. I'm highly doubtful that they're going to get more than 4 or 5 all SEC guys out of this, even if Napier's an unbelievable evaluator. And 4 all SEC guys in the season is going to be a 10-win, sort of like a Tennessee season from last year where we get excited, but we don't actually win anything at the end of the day. And that's not necessarily what we signed up for.
I'll take that one in the next 2 years, though. And then you better use it as a launching point.
Well, so again, if you get 4 stars out of these 2 classes and DJ Lagway turns into an absolute stud at quarterback and Miles Graham comes in and is just hitting people like crazy at the linebacker position, and you add 3 or 4 more guys of that ilk in the 2024 class, then certainly you can start to build into that. So look, I'm not ready to give up on Billy Napier, but I think we have to be honest about where we are.
Exactly.
You can't get out of the woods, even if you have a map, if you don't know where you are on the map. And so all this is looking at the rankings and say, this is where we are on the map. Now, what's the route out? Well, the route out is they're going to have to convert a lot of these guys into either really, really solid starters. I mean, look, if they end up with 20 of their 24 blue chips being starters, well, now you add a couple of elite guys from the 2024 class, and the team is ready to compete for an SEC championship. But you're going to have to hit at an inordinate rate at least compared to your predecessor in order to get that done. And that's just the reality.
Want more Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month, get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat room, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to gatorsbreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today.